A devoted couple building the perfect family.
They were both very committed to adopting children that had a difficult past.
Everybody in the family loved her.
Murdered in a night of unspeakable horror.
She saw a man with what appeared to be an axe.
Her skull was split with a maul.
Who could have wanted Bob and Kay Swartz dead?
This person had threatened to kill them.
We couldn't rule out anyone. We just didn't know.
And what detectives uncover has everyone blindsided.
I didn't have a single suspicion. I would have never thought.
The relatives were in disbelief.
The expected killer hadn't done it. The unexpected killer had done it.
Nobody in a million years would have expected them to commit one of the most heinous crimes in the history of it.
Police in Cape St. Clair, Maryland, receive an eerie call.
Okay, what is the problem, sir? My parents are dead. You think your parents are dead? Yeah.
First responders race to the scene and make a horrific discovery.
When I arrived, there were uniformed officers that were protecting the crime scene who told me we had a 17-year-old and a 9-year-old who just learned that their parents, Bob and Kay Swartz, were killed.
The children are visibly shaken and in shock, but agree to answer a few questions.
My partner and I met with a young man by the name of Larry Schwartz and his sister Annie. Both of them were very calm. This young man, he said that he had gotten up that morning and that Annie, who was 9, told them that she didn't know where their parents were. He then looked out the dining room window and saw his mother's body in the backyard. He told me he immediately shielded Annie's eyes so Annie wouldn't see her body and called the police.
Detective Barr leaves the kids in the care of the attending officers and moves to the backyard. It's his first grim look at the scene of the crime.
Kay Swartz was found outside. She was a few feet from the sliding glass door in the snow. She only had one sock on her right foot. Her left foot was bare.
The blood in the snow was horrific. It was just horrific.
The blood had created a slush in the snow. Kay Swartz had puncture wounds around her neck, and she had a massive wound to the top of her skull.
Detective Barr then heads inside.
I looked in the basement area, and I found a black vinyl chair that had pooled blood beside it. It appeared as though she had been attacked sitting in that chair, and she bled heavily onto the floor. And there was blood from that chair leading out back.
Just when it seems the crime scene can't get any more grisly, detectives discover another ravaged body.
We found a small office adjacent to the landing of the stairs. The door was closed. We opened the door, looked inside, and found Bob Schwartz's body. There was an inordinate number of stab wounds to Bob Schwartz. There were defensive wounds in the body. We theorized at that point it was very possible that Kay was attacked first, and then Bob heard the noise and started to come out of the room, giving Kay the opportunity to flee out the back door as the killer or killers went after Bob.
As detectives make their way through the rest of the house, they see no signs of forced entry. Did Bob and Kay know their attacker? Or did an intruder sneak in through an unlocked door?
As I viewed this crime scene, the enormity was off the chart. There was blood found everywhere. It was extraordinarily gruesome.
Investigators collect blood evidence, but there's no sign of a knife or any kind of murder weapon. Then, toward the back of the house, they spot a critical clue.
We found a bloody palm print on the sliding glass door near Kay's body. We wanted to figure out who it actually belonged to. Bob obviously never left the computer room. He died where he was attacked. And Kay's body was outside, and neither one of her hands had blood on the palms. That palm print probably belonged to the killer.
While concerned neighbors whisk Larry and Annie away, detectives get a chance to talk to some of Bob and Kay's grieving friends who have gathered at the house.
When I found out that Bob and Kay had been murdered, I said, "What? You're numb. You don't know what happened." And I just couldn't believe that Bob and Kay were gone.
Bob and Kay Swartz met at the University of Maryland outside Washington, D.C. They were both getting their master's degree in education. They both wanted to be teachers. He was 35, she was 27. She fell in love with him, and maybe 18 months later they married.
They were very involved in all kinds of church activities. Kay and Bob were intimately involved. Everybody seemed to know them. Everybody felt a connection with them.
Bob was an engineer of sorts, worked at NASA Goddard down in Greenbelt, Maryland, in the space program on some level.
Bob had to be a pretty clever man because he was involved in computers back in the dark ages, 1984.
He was always very positive. He was funny, quick sense of humor.
Kay was the fun-loving, carefree spirit, beloved by everyone who knew her. Always wanted to be a teacher, became a teacher. They wanted children, but Kay was unable to have children.
Far from breaking their spirit, Bob and Kay's disappointment only seemed to strengthen their bond and gave them a loving sense of purpose.
They decided they wanted to open their house and their hearts.
In 1973, Bob and Kay embarked on their dream.
That became part of their mission in life, in adopting children that had a difficult past, to provide some substance and some guidance.
Larry Swartz was 6 years old when the Swartzes adopted him. 6 years later, they adopted a 4-year-old girl, Anne.
Annie was born in Korea, did not speak much English when she first arrived. Annie and Larry were happy to be part of that family.
Kay and Bob wanted to be the best parents ever to those children.
Now, Larry and Annie were orphans again, and detectives need to find out who committed such a heinous crime and why. Police begin by talking to neighbors, hoping to find a witness who might lead them to the killer.
We were alerted by a person approximately a block away on a parallel street that he had found what appeared to be a blood trail leading into the woods at the end of that street. And as we followed that trail, we found what appeared to be a barefoot footprint and a socked footprint.
Were these Kay's footprints? If so, how did they end up in the woods when her body was found in the backyard?
We also found a pair of footprints made by shoes. Footprints suggesting a chase through the neighborhood.
The trail of footprints ran for quite a distance through the woods and the neighborhood.
The footprints seemed to suggest that after stabbing Bob to death, the murderer went after Kay one last time.
In my opinion, it appeared as though Kay Swartz was fleeing from her killer, and at some point, a person caught up with her and then walked her to the back of the home where she was killed.
At the end of the trail, detectives make one more pivotal discovery.
Searching through the woods, my sergeant found what appeared to be a murder weapon. It was a wood-splitting maul. There appeared to be blood on the maul, along with hair. But the handle appeared to have been wiped clean. There wasn't any blood on the handle at all.
Detectives send the maul to the lab, but find no trace of a knife anywhere. It's a puzzling scene that offers them few clues.
It was a very difficult crime scene to try to put together in your mind what may have happened or how did this occur. At this point, we only had 2 children, Larry and Annie, who could provide any information.
When detectives circle back to them at the neighbor's house, they do their best to help.
Annie related to us that she had awakened in the middle of the night to her father's screams of "help me, help me." She continued to tell us that she went to investigate and she walked to the door that exited to the carport. At that point, she saw a man walking away with what appeared to be an axe over his shoulder. And she described the person as very tall, with curly hair, and asked, "Was that person as tall as me?" She said, "No, he was taller."
Detectives speak to Larry next, but suddenly the 17-year-old seems nervous. Does he know something about the man Annie saw in the yard?
When we pressed Larry, he said that Michael was 6'4".
Detectives stop cold. Who is Michael?
And very quickly I established that Michael Schwartz was a brother of Larry.
As it turned out, Bob and Kay Schwartz had adopted 3 children.
Michael, who was also 17, no longer lived with them, but it wasn't clear why. So at that point, we were very, very eager to talk to Michael.
Coming up, investigators uncover bad blood and dark secrets.
They send him to a state mental hospital.
Detectives uncover startling clues.
Nobody expected anything like this to happen.
It became almost unbelievable.
Was there more than one person with a score to settle?
This person said, I could stick a knife in his back.
We didn't.
The homicides of Bob and Kay Schwartz. Police learned the couple's adopted children have an estranged brother.
Both Annie and Larry related to us that Michael no longer lived with them, but had been getting into a lot of trouble.
Detectives are anxious to know more. Could Michael have possibly wanted to harm Bob and Kay?
As we spoke to relatives during the investigation, Michael was quickly identified by them as someone we should look at very closely.
Michael had made threats internally in the house.
Detectives interview the Schwartz's friends and family to get more insight into Michael's history. Larry was the Schwartz's first adopted child. But long before Annie, Bob and Kay provided Larry with a brother.
Michael was 8 years old when the Schwartzes adopted him. The boys were only 6 months apart in age.
The Schwartz's second adopted child had arrived at their home, a troubled boy.
As they interviewed everybody, detectives found that Michael's mother abandoned him when he was an infant, and Michael was relinquished to the custody of the state and became a foster child. He went through a series of 6 foster homes before the Schwartzes adopted him.
Bob and Kay were determined to turn Michael's life around, but the boy's difficult past wasn't easy to shake, and the problem started almost immediately.
Michael was so antisocial in his approach to life. Michael was having behavioral issues at home, not obeying his parents on a consistent basis, smarting back, profanity.
As the boys grew older, Michael continued to struggle. But that didn't stop Bob and Kay from having high hopes for both their children.
I think Bob and Kay expected Larry and Michael to apply themselves very diligently to their studies and to do well. I think that Larry had a desire to please people. He had kind of a soft-spoken shyness to him. He seemed to want to engage with people. But I think Michael was a challenge from the get-go. I think Michael, he had some deviancies that probably would have precluded anybody from having any type of relationship with him on any level.
2 years after Michael was adopted, Bob and Kay found a new ray of hope when they adopted Annie.
Annie was cute as a button when she arrived. Everybody loved her.
Bob adored Anne. Annie became the apple of her father's eye, and suddenly Annie, the baby, became the favorite child. Everybody in the family loved her.
The more attention Bob gave Annie, the harder he was on his 2 boys. Larry seemed to be able to turn the other cheek, but not Michael.
Michael had been getting into trouble more increasingly over the last year or so.
Michael began to have problems of a fairly serious nature. Tension between he and his father, tension between he and the other family members.
By 1980, Michael's rebellious nature pushed his parents to their breaking point.
One night, Michael asked to go out, and they said no. So he sneaked out. Went out with his buddies. When he came back home at about midnight, he pounds on the door. His mother comes to the door, looks at him and says, "No, we're not letting you in." He goes over to a neighbor's house, spends the night, goes to school the next day on his own. And while he's there, his parents had called. Social services said, "We can't handle him anymore."
After 5 years of struggling with Michael, Bob and Kay were so concerned about his volatile behavior that they asked the state to place him with another family.
He never lived at home again.
It was just a very difficult situation. Bob and Kay loved him, but they felt there was nothing they could do for him.
While Bob and Kay tried to stay focused on Larry and Annie, Michael's state of mind seemed to deteriorate.
Michael had been in a reform school and he got in a fight and got in some trouble, so they sent him to a state mental hospital for evaluation. And that was just a few weeks before the murders. He was staying at this facility.
The Crownsville State Hospital Center was terrifying, faceless, institutional, decrepit buildings, straight out of a Stephen King nightmare.
Had Bob and Kay's rejection led Michael Swartz to commit a cold-blooded murder? Detective Barr and his partner decide to make the short drive to Crownsville and ask Michael for themselves.
He was interrogated by these talented homicide detectives. Michael's denying.
Michael's words say one thing, but to the detectives, his appearance tells a different story.
They did notice it. Michael had very noticeable marks on his long neck, and he clearly had an injury of some kind there. But he said they were hickeys.
Detectives keep pushing, but Michael is adamant that he was at the hospital on the night of the murders, and the hospital records back up his claims.
We learned from the staff that their logs indicated that Michael had been there all evening.
He has what appears to be an ironclad alibi. I mean, he is in a locked ward in a state mental hospital.
The police weren't so sure. A lot of people weren't so sure. It was very lax at this Crownsville State facility. It's not a prison. It's just a hospital.
Detectives aren't completely convinced of Michael's alibi, but they don't have enough to arrest him either. And soon after that interview, Michael Swartz lawyers up.
Of course, I finally got to him. I did what all defense lawyers do, which is to say, don't say a word to anybody about anything. He was never interrogated again.
Michael won't talk, and the lab has found no useful prints on the handle of the splitting maul. But detectives know one key piece of evidence from the crime scene that could tell them everything they need to know.
During the investigation, there was a bloody palm print recovered from the sliding glass door. We had examined both victims. Neither one had blood on the palms.
If detectives can prove Michael Swartz left that print, they'll have their murderer. But that's easier said than done.
This evidence was difficult to analyze. We were very limited in 1984 with what we could do. This would involve the evidence being sent to the
Swartz are hoping one of their most promising pieces of evidence will help them catch the killer.
A bloody palm print was lifted and sent to the FBI laboratory for analysis. We knew that it would probably take a long time to get those results.
While the feds in Washington do their careful work, the shocking news of the murder spreads.
There was a tremendous uproar in the community about this murder. A couple were murdered in their own home. A crazed killer chasing a woman through the neighborhood. There was a lot of pressure to solve the case.
That pressure only mounts when detectives receive the coroner's report. It's a grim account of a seemingly psychotic attack.
The wounds to Mr. Swartz numbered 17 in total, and in fact were lethal. Both his right and left carotid were severed during the attack.
On Kay Swartz, the autopsy showed that she was stabbed 7 times around her neck area, but they were very light wounds, tentative, and then her skull was split with a maul.
Detectives still haven't been able to locate the knife used in the attack, but the coroner's report does appear to confirm that they're on the right track.
According to the medical examiner, we had the right theory about how this may have occurred. Kay was stabbed in the basement, got up to flee. The killer would have chased Kay Swartz as she ran from the neighborhood and into the woods, then back to the house where she was killed.
Is it possible Michael Swartz eluded security at the Crownsville Mental Hospital and committed this crime? If so, detectives need to understand why.
I think it's fair to say there was tension in the house. Bob had a bit of a shorter fuse than Kay and had a little bit less willingness to be tolerant of some of the children's shortcomings.
Neighbors tell detectives a story they remember from a few years before, when Michael was still living with the Swartzes.
Michael got in trouble for some sin, fighting on a school bus, something like that. And his father decided physical labor was what he needed. So he gave him this heavy wood-splitting maul and said, take this stump out of the front yard, the dead tree stump. It was massive, a massive thing. There was no way Michael could get it. But he just swung it again and again and again.
Neighbors told us that Michael chopped at that tree every evening for up to 3 hours. And approaching a month later, the stump was still there. This boy had blisters on his hands.
Michael was seething and getting more and more angry. Everybody said Michael had threatened to kill his parents.
Could the maul that was used to teach Michael Swartz a lesson have been the same one that ended Kay's life?
Michael told his mother, Kay, that I could walk up to Bob and stick a knife in his back, kill him, and no results would befall me because I'm a juvenile. The logical assumption on all of our parts was Michael had made good on his threat. He had said he would do it, and now he's done it.
Four days after they were found brutally murdered, Bob and Kay are laid to rest.
The funeral, I had replays of having moments with them. I always admired them. Like, why would somebody kill them?
The couple's obedient children, Larry and Annie Swartz, have been staying with friends of the family, while their brother still resides at Crownsville.
Michael Swartz was allowed out of the hospital to come to the funeral, and at the cemetery, both boys stood over the grave and shook holy water, one into Kay's grave, the other into Bob's grave. Off to one side, the 2 detectives on the case stood in their suits with their sunglasses in the cemetery.
Everyone gathered around, gave them their support. But most people believed it was Michael who had done it.
Many note the suspicious red marks still visible on Michael's neck. Talk spreads through the community.
The newspapers were saying that Michael was a suspect. But even though he was in Crownsville at the time, there was some question about the accountability there, and maybe he could have gotten away and done it.
With lingering concerns over Michael's alibi and the security at Crownsville, detectives decide there's only one way to find the truth once and for all.
Wanting to make sure that we had crossed every T and dotted every I, my partner and I decided that we were going to follow up and visit that mental hospital again. We wanted to make sure that it was impossible that Michael would never have been able to leave undetected. So we asked the staff to lock us in the ward where Michael was committed. If Michael could have gotten out of that, there was a chance
Detectives are about to put Michael Schwartz's alibi to the test by locking themselves in the room where he stayed at the Crownsville Mental Hospital.
If he had killed his parents, Michael would have had to leave undetected, return, and get back in without someone discovering that. And we went through every door and every window, and there was no possible way we could have gotten out of that without help. So it was very convincing to us that Michael was not at the scene of the murder. Michael's been eliminated as a suspect.
It's good news for Michael, but a setback for detectives. The young man was their strongest lead. Undaunted, investigators reach out to the public, hoping to cast a much wider net.
As we conducted our investigation, we methodically went through a list of possible persons that may have intended harm to the Schwartzes. We started a hotline for people to call in tips, and we got phone calls from various neighbors and acquaintances.
One of the many calls that come in immediately piques the detectives' interest.
Persons we interviewed told us that Bob steadfastly picketed an abortion clinic in Annapolis for 4 years, never missed a Saturday. And he would approach women entering the abortion clinic and attempt to change their mind about what they were going to do.
He would intensely try to dissuade women from coming into the clinic. He would get up in their faces.
Detectives confirm that a few of those women filed police reports against Bob, so they begin interviewing every complainant and witness connected with those reports.
The police were called on several occasions by the clinic. Bob was never arrested, but he caused the abortion clinic a lot of grief.
Could the killer be someone Bob confronted, or someone with a grudge against Kay?
Kay was a school teacher at Broadneck High School.
In her classroom, she was known for laissez-faire, not a strict disciplinarian.
According to witnesses, Kay was well liked in school. She was an easygoing teacher.
Detectives pursue every credible tip that comes in.
Our investigation revealed that there was no evidence that anyone would have a vendetta against her. In fact, there was no motive that we could establish where anyone would have been that angry or vengeful to want to kill either of them.
"8 days after the brutal double murder, investigators have hit a wall. With no fingerprints on the splitting mall and their single most promising piece of evidence still under analysis, detectives are all out of options. Undaunted, they decide to start fresh, poring over every piece of evidence they do have, starting at the very beginning.
Colorado County Police. Please have someone come to my house. Okay, what is the problem, sir? My parents are dead. You think your parents are dead? Yes.
This time, investigators hone in on something they didn't notice before.
When I listened to the 911 call, Larry Schwartz said, "My parents are dead."
My parents are dead.
However, he told the first police officer on the scene that he hadn't gone downstairs. His father was in the basement. At that point, he was only known that his mother was dead, not his father. So there's an inconsistency there. It didn't make sense.
The discovery leads Detective Barr to take a harder look at Larry's version of events, and he finds several contradictions.
For example, Larry telling us that he saw his mother's body from the window, yet I looked out the dining room window and couldn't see her body. I thought perhaps he was confused and meant to say the kitchen window, which turned out to be even worse. I climbed on the kitchen counter and looked out the window and still couldn't see her body.
Detective Barr had chalked it up to the extreme shock the boy had suffered that morning.
Larry's demeanor wasn't unusual at the time. Various people react differently under stress. He could have very well been in shock, repressing his feelings. I didn't know.
Barr wants to give Larry a chance to clear up his story, but that isn't going to happen.
Larry had gotten an attorney. The attorney had advised him not to talk to us.
At last, word comes in from the FBI. Test results on their key piece of evidence from the crime scene. The bloody palm print on the sliding glass door. The one detectives believed was made by the killer.
It came back. Finally, we could find out who it could possibly belong to, what we were dealing with.
Coming up, it's a twist that no one saw coming.
A chill just went up my spine. It just didn't seem right.
Detectives working to catch Bob and Kay Schwartz's killer finally had the results of their key piece of crime scene evidence from the FBI's forensic lab in Washington, D.C.
I was notified by the FBI laboratory that they had positively identified the bloody palm print recovered from the sliding glass door.
The results confirm what detectives believed months earlier. The palm print belongs to one of Bob and Kay's own children, but not the child they suspected.
It came back belonging to Larry Schwartz. At that point, the state's attorney for Anne Arundel County authorized an arrest warrant be obtained for Larry Schwartz.
Authorities charged young Schwartz as an adult with 2 counts of first-degree murder.
When the news gets out, it causes an uproar in Cape St. Clair. Michael Schwartz was known as the bad kid in the family, not handsome, likable Larry.
A chill just went up my spine. It just didn't seem right. I didn't have a single suspicion.
It was very difficult to accept that Larry had that type of violence within him.
Larry was seen as this model, mild-mannered son. Nobody in a million years would have expected him to commit one of the most heinous crimes in the history of Annapolis.
The community was in denial. The majority of them were convinced that Michael Schwartz had done this. There was certainly a lot of speculation about whether we had the right person or not.
It was very hard for people to believe that he could have done it. I think that they just felt there was more to this. There was more going on than any of us could understand.
Why would a docile youth, beloved by everybody, explode in a rage and stab both his parents? Why? Everybody wanted to know the answer.
Authorities want answers too. But Larry, at the direction of the defense team hired by concerned family friends, is not talking and has neither admitted nor denied guilt. So for the next 15 months, while Larry waits it out in jail, detectives spend every waking moment trying to build an airtight case.
We lacked a confession. The state's attorney for Anne Arundel County had me reassigned to his office to work exclusively on this case. We had to make sure that we had every piece of evidence we could get to close this case.
Without Larry's confession, detectives need to find out what led this soft-spoken boy to such violent extremes.
I continued to interview people, collect statements.
Investigators soon realized that Michael wasn't the only son who had a hard time at home.
I believe that Larry was under tremendous pressure. He was repeatedly chastised for the poor grades. He was restricted from leaving the yard.
I think it was more of a protection thing. You're trying to keep him away from the wrong crowd. And I think Larry could have been pulled in many ways. I think they were afraid of that.
I believe personally that he was angry. He was frustrated. It was cumulative, that he was holding rage inside him. And whatever may have happened that night set him off.
But some speculated that there was another reason why Larry turned on his parents.
Michael kept contact with Larry. He changed Larry's view of the family, and in a negative way. He was telling him that they just got rid of me, they want nothing to do with me, you know. Larry, he didn't want to be left like that. He didn't want to go into foster home again.
Larry was extremely worried that what happened to Michael would happen to him.
Then it changed where he was afraid he was going to be put out.
Despite what may have led to this violent act, 17-year-old Larry Swartz is about to be tried for first-degree murder.
15 months after the crimes, the prosecutor had witnesses ready to lined up, psychiatric witnesses who said Larry was sane and he knew what he was doing and he actually planned it. And they had a case to present that showed premeditated, cold-blooded murder.
Larry Swartz looked unconcerned as he arrived this morning from the county jail where he had spent the last 15 months.
More than 60 witnesses have been subpoenaed to testify at Larry Swartz's trial, which is expected to last 2 weeks.
I was at the courthouse expecting a trial. There was no trial. Nobody expected anything like this to happen.
It was a case against Larry Swartz for the murder of his parents. A last-minute maneuver by Swartz's legal team has brought everything to an unexpected, screeching halt. The trial is called off.
Larry had confessed to his attorneys.
He broke down. He broke down sobbing and heaving, and he said he did it, he was guilty, and he just killed them.
Finally, authorities have their confession, leaving behind any doubt of Larry's guilt.
Ultimately, the expected killer hadn't done it. The unexpected killer had done it.
Now, the state's attorney's office has to decide what punishment could possibly fit this crime.
The state agreed to a plea of second-degree murder.
The prosecutor recommended a 20-year sentence with all but 12 suspended. The judge agreed to make it concurrent as opposed to consecutive. I've never seen a case that lenient.
The state's attorney wanted me to take Larry to the confinement facility. He knew that if I took Larry, there was a potential for Larry to tell me why he did this and how did it really occur. And I sat down with him and asked him to tell us, Larry, why did you do it? He didn't answer me. And I pressed him again, and he said, I just lost it. He said that he had come home from school that day, and later in the evening, his mother had asked him how he had done on his tests. And he knew that he had failed Spanish, and she had been writing him about not doing well in school. And she made a caustic remark about his grades, you probably failed them, meaning the tests. So he took a knife and he stabbed her repeatedly about the neck. And then Bob was alerted to the activity, the noise, and he attacked Bob. Larry never did explain or admit to chasing Kay through the neighborhood. I found out during the autopsy that she'd been stabbed through her esophagus, so perhaps she couldn't scream. With sheer terror, running for her life, Larry did admit to putting the splitting maul into his mother's head.
After committing such a violent act, Larry knew there was only one way to cast off suspicion.
Anne County Police.
We came to the realization that throughout the interview with Larry, he was trying to steer our investigation. He force-fed us information about Michael.
The whole time that his brother Michael was a suspect in the killings, Larry played the victim card.
When we were here for the funeral, Larry wanted to hang out with us, essentially, which we were perfectly prepared to do. not believing for a minute that he was involved. We viewed him as a victim, a kid who didn't have any parents at this point in time. It's, to this day, hard to fathom.
Though Larry's adoptive brother Michael had been exonerated, he nonetheless met with a tragic end.
When it turned out that he didn't commit the murders, he had nowhere to go. His parents are dead. His brother's in prison. His sister's been adopted by another family, and he has no one in the world. He starts doing drugs. And while he's taking drugs, he and his buddies go rob a man, and in the course of robbing the man, they stabbed him to death. Michael is sentenced to prison for life. None of the leniency his brother got. Life. He's now in his 50s, still in prison in the state of Maryland, 35 years later.
This just had to be one of the worst lose-lose destructive situations that society can see happen.
Looking back over this case, I have empathy for both Michael and Larry. I know that they struggled, yet the parents still tried to do.
Tonight, a red-hot court case from this summer, the so-called Black Swan. Was it murder or was it self-defense?
David, I have the exclusive interview with the ballerina at the center of it all. Not on stage, but on trial for murder. An all-new 2020 begins right now.
I was living a nightmare at home. It was terrifying. It was like two different people, and I never knew which Doug I was gonna get.
You're 24, he's 54. Were you worried about her connecting with this guy who's so much older?
Things didn't start off well. It was like, oh yeah, Eva, this is my new wife.
I felt like Ashley was taking my dad away from me.
It was all a masquerade. I mean, can I straight up say that? Doug was not who he portrayed himself to be.
That was sort of like, what's going on?
So you're thinking that your husband, the man who loved you and seemed to adore you, would poison you?
I read the allegations and I thought, oh my God, this is crazy. Doug never poisoned Ashley.
Is it possible that maybe you just imagined this?
Maybe it was all in my head.
But you know now that this sounds pretty dysfunctional.
Doug, what are you doing? She tried to ruin your life. I don't think he could have ever guessed what was going to happen to him.
I've never been so scared in my life.
Growing up, Ashley Benefield wanted nothing more than to become a world-class ballerina. She never dreamed that one day she'd be wearing a court-ordered ankle bracelet along with her pointe shoes.
Man County 911, what is the emergency?
Okay, it's right next door to me. She came in, she was quite hysterical. She said that he attacked her and she shot him.
Where is the gun?
I have it right here, ma'am. It's sitting on the floor. Where in the house is he?
Deputies are moving as fast as they can.
A normally quiet Lakewood Ranch neighborhood turned into a bloody crime scene.
Was it murder or self-defense?
It's a story with a lot of twists and turns.
The 32-year-old former ballerina alleging he attacked her in her home and that she fired back multiple times in self-defense.
Miss Benefield was in great fear of immediate and severe bodily harm.
A woman out on bond, still awaiting her fate.
So many law enforcement officials said, no, this isn't adding up.
Former ballerina at the center of the so-called Black Swan murder trial.
Only two people know exactly what happened. One of them is a suspect for second-degree murder. The other is dead.
Until now, Ashley has remained silent about the night of the shooting, about what happened in that house in this Florida community. But tonight, in her first interview, Ashley Benefield tells her story.
Fingers are rolling.
Hey there. Your first time doing this, so here we go. Let's go back to your life in the beginning. You wanted to be a ballet dancer?
Yeah, actually, I started when I was 8. A family member was dancing on Broadway, and I was very inspired by her and what she was doing.
And what was it about ballet that captivated you?
It's complex. It's something that is beautiful and powerful, but at the same time, there's a lot of control and you have to be reserved. I think it's just the kind of dynamic of all of the things combined.
Ashley grew up in Maryland as an only child. Her mom, Alicia Byers, says they had a special bond. Your marriage dissolved, you split up with her father, and you raised her as a single mom.
Mm-hmm.
What was that like for the two of you?
At first, it was an adjustment, but we did well. We're very close. She was blessed with a lot of talents, and so it was a real joy raising her.
And at some point, she becomes smitten with ballet.
Very, yes. She got to the point where she did it 7 days a week.
I was training during the day, all day. It was an everyday, all day thing.
She soon learns that it takes more than ability alone to make it as a professional dancer. Ashley's 5'9" and considered by most ballet companies to be too tall, something no amount of training can overcome.
There are height ranges in companies. A lot of that is because of partnering and complications that can arise if you're not well matched height-wise.
The ballet world tends to be kind of cookie cutter. It was hard finding a good fit for a company.
With her height and then a hamstring injury holding her back, Ashley decides to hang up her point shoes in her early 20s. You begin to shift your focus a little bit. In 2016, you became captivated by politics. What led you to the Trump campaign?
Well, I'd actually always been interested in politics. I wasn't looking for it. The opportunity came up, and I was just finishing up with one chapter of my life, and it seemed like the right thing to do, so I jumped in.
Ashley's job for the Trump campaign was to go to rallies, and she would rile up the crowd, pray with the crowd. You could actually see videos of her online. She thought she was going to be part of the Trump team.
In her diary entries from this time, Ashley says she felt a special bond with candidate Trump. She writes, "We got to the plane early and waited for Mr. Trump to arrive." Ashley writes about her hopes for her future. She writes kind of a plea to God. "I want to be a wife and mother. Please bring me to that special man you've chosen for me."
Ashley wanted children. She wanted a family. She prayed that God would bring her a man to be with her. She made it clear in the diary what her plan was.
In August of 2016, in the thick of the campaign, her prayers seemed to be answered while attending a fundraiser at Dr. Ben Carson's home in Palm Beach, Florida. At some point, you meet a man named Doug Benefield.
Yes.
What did you think of him?
He was charming. Very funny, really smart, confident, but quiet. We were there for political reasons, but then also he was a man of faith, shared similar interests.
Those common interests included politics, God, and guns.
First night that Doug and Ashley met, Ashley had a gun in her bra. Doug, who has a military background, he thought, wow, look at this girl. Like, she's strong and she's powerful and she's, not afraid of weapons, and everything about her was just great.
He nicknamed you Ashley Oakley.
Yeah, we both had very strong opinions about the Second Amendment. That was something we bonded over. I had a concealed carry permit. You wanted to be a responsible gun owner. We talked the whole night. When the evening was over and everyone was leaving, we were texting and up till 3 o'clock in the morning. It just seemed like I had met my soulmate. We were like the perfect match. He kind of swept me off my feet. It was like a whirlwind. I think it was about 4 days in when he first told me he loved me.
4 days? That's pretty quick.
Yeah, it was quick.
Something Something else Ashley says didn't bother her was the couple's significant age difference. You're 24, he's 54.
Yeah.
You're a young woman. Suddenly you're being romanced by this 54-year-old man. Did anybody in your life say, slow down, Ashley?
No, it just kind of happened.
But the bliss wouldn't last. Ashley learns that the man she's falling for has been married before.
Nothing was adding up. The more I tried to figure things out, the more the story changed.
And she says she begins uncovering secrets, leading her to wonder just who Doug Benefield really is. In the summer of 2016, 24-year-old Ashley Benefield is on the road stumping for Donald Trump when she finds romance at a Palm Beach fundraiser. Did sparks begin to fly between you two?
It was like an instant connection, yeah. We both had that evangelical background, so we spent a lot of time talking about that.
Doug Benefield grew up in a Baptist family, the middle of 3 sons, with a stay-at-home mom and a father who worked as a scientist at NASA.
Doug graduated from high school in Huntsville, Alabama. He was a top wrestler in the state. He decided to follow his father and our family to Texas A&M.
After graduating from college, Doug joins the U.S. Navy in Pensacola. He rises through the ranks quickly, and the Navy assigns Doug to a position in Charleston, South Carolina.
While he's working for the Defense Intelligence Agency, he gets involved in renovations of old historic buildings with people that he meets in Charleston.
Doug started up some businesses here, a restaurant, some other things. He had a group of friends and colleagues.
He loved it there. And one of those locations that he most loved was out on Sullivan's Island. Doug found a small hole-in-the-wall Irish pub called Dunleavy's Pub. That same Irish pub is where he meets his wife, Renee.
If someone were to ask me to sum up Renee in a few sentences, it'd be very difficult. She's stunningly beautiful but doesn't know it, and loves to make people laugh.
Doug has a pretty quick courtship with a woman named Renee Kauser. They marry, and in 2001, their daughter Eva is born.
My mom was the sweetest, happiest woman you would ever meet. She was an angel walking on earth. She was never, ever, ever in a bad mood. She loved everybody.
Doug's marriage to Renee, by all accounts, was a happy marriage. Of course, ups and downs, but generally a happy marriage.
Doug and Renee and Eva together are just this triad. They're just 3 together all the time. You never saw them apart. Happy, beautiful family.
But when Eva is just 14, the happy family suffers a devastating loss.
I was waiting in the pickup line outside of my school, and she wasn't there. And I went home, and nobody was answering the doorbell, and I didn't have my key, and my mom wasn't answering her texts.
Eva called and said, I can't get a hold of my mom, and Dad's in Dallas. And so I get on the phone with Doug.
Doug asks Melody for help. Her husband goes next door and breaks into the house to find Renee unresponsive, face down on her bed.
I just remember going back out on the porch and seeing my neighbor's face, and he shook his head, and I knew that she just wasn't there anymore. She passed of an underlying heart condition. It was shocking.
An autopsy reveals that Renee died of natural causes.
He tried to stay really strong for me, and I never really saw him break down from it. It was different. It was quiet in the house. It was just different.
Then, just 9 short months after her mother's passing, Eva meets a new woman in her father's life, Ashley Benefield.
I heard about her on a Friday. I met her the following Saturday, and then Sunday, I was up in my room and my dad came upstairs and he said, Eva, we need to have a conversation, all three of us. And I said, no, I think the only thing that I would be interested in hearing is if you told me that you proposed to her. And as soon as those words came out of my mouth, he said, we're married. Yeah, it was a lot.
Eva's not the only one blindsided by the quick marriage, which happened at a secret ceremony just 13 days after Doug and Ashley met.
First time I hear anything about Ashley is they're married and she's already moved in to Doug's home in Mount Pleasant.
How did he propose? Was this a formal get on his knee and propose to you? How did that happen?
It was more of like, hey, you know, we should just do this. Like, let's get married. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay.
They move very quickly, and before you know it, they're engaged and married.
Yeah, it was like, whoa.
What was your wedding like?
It was small. It was just me and Doug and two of his friends.
So suddenly you're Mrs. Benefield.
Yep.
Were you happy?
I was thrilled. Yeah, I felt like I had finally met my soulmate. I think a lot of it had to do with Eva. He really sold me on the fact that she needed a mommy person to be there. And I guess I felt needed and wanted.
But Eva, still grieving the loss of her mom, says she neither wanted nor needed a stepmom, especially one so close to her in age.
The age difference between me and Ashley is 8 years. Anytime I hung out with her and we were shopping downtown, we would get mistaken as sisters.
How did you get along with Eva?
I think things didn't start off well because she didn't really find out until after we were married. It was like, oh yeah, Eva, this is my new wife. And it didn't go over well.
I will just say this, he messed up. He messed up by jumping in to a relationship and not inviting his daughter into it. That was, I think, a huge mistake.
My dad seemed very excited and happy, and I also understood that he was grieving differently than me.
Ashley and Doug are moving full steam ahead. They don't just want a romantic partnership, they want to be business partners.
It seemed like we found something once again that we were both equally passionate about, so we just hit the ground running.
But what Ashley and Doug don't realize is that both the romance and the business will soon self-destruct.
You can't make promises and not live up to them.
Like, what's going on? People were mad.
I found out that it was all a masquerade.
My name is Sarah Muraski. When I was a young girl, I saw a performance of The Nutcracker, and I fell in love with it right away. I knew right in that moment that's what I wanted to do with my life.
After years of sacrifice and dedication, Sarah finally gets her big break. She's cast in the Pennsylvania Ballet's production of The Nutcracker, in the lead role, the Sugar Plum Fairy.
It was like it was a fairy tale in a way. In that moment of my life, it was everything I could have dreamed up.
But Sarah says one night backstage, her dream is unexpectedly shattered. She's told that the company is going in another direction.
The director took me aside and said, "You're too tall." For me to even think that it was done was unimaginable after sacrificing my whole life for this moment, for this career. It was a few months after that that I received a message online from Ashley Benefield.
Ashley says she and Doug were talking one night when they had the idea to start a ballet company that would include all kinds of dancers.
I was a tall dancer. I'm just a tall person, I guess. I just been talking about how there were things in the ballet world that I didn't think were right. and that, well, you know, if it was up to me, I would do it differently. And he was like, well, why don't we do it?
Ashley called me. We spoke. I remember her saying things like, I want to make a change for ballet. I want ballet to be able to show its beauty in the best way with all different kinds of dancers.
The concept was diversity. I trained with beautiful dancers of all shapes, sizes, colors, backgrounds, you name it, and I watched them have a hard time getting a job. I was frustrated by that.
You came up with the name for it, American National Ballet.
Yep.
So he was going to handle the business part, and you would be more creative.
Yep. Doug had done a lot of like fundraising for different companies, for a lot of these kind of up and coming tech companies. And I remember him being like, oh, you know, tech companies and ballet, like I'm sure we can, you know, fundraise for both.
Doug sat down with me and directly asked me, I want you to work with Ashley. You know what you're doing to help get the basics of the company started.
He said they were doing a ballet company, and I'd come home from school and Ashley was in the dining room with headshots laid out, sticky notes everywhere.
When I was originally brought in, Ashley had already hired, there were 50 dancers in the company, which surprised me because when you're first starting out, that's an awful lot of money that's going out, and you don't have any money coming in yet.
That was sort of like, what's going on? It just seemed like a lot for a company that was starting out, and that maybe they were biting off more than they could chew.
Even though he doesn't have the backing yet, Doug is convinced that he can raise the money. So dozens of dancers from all over the world flock to American National Ballet with the promise of year-long contracts, state-of-the-art studio facilities, even a housing stipend for apartments in the heart of Charleston.
The idea was remarkable. The execution was a little less.
It became somewhat apparent fairly quickly that Doug was overpromising and not going to be able to deliver on all of this.
In the fall of 2017, the dancers began arriving, only to find that the promised housing stipend isn't available, and the original rehearsal space promised doesn't exist.
And then I think in like mid-October, word started to get out that the dancers weren't quite getting paid in a traditional way, that they were being paid in cash.
Doug was then pulling money from every source that he could of his own, money that he didn't have, to try to just fund this ballet.
It just got worse and worse each day. I didn't know where the company was going.
Adding to the chaos, Ashley is nowhere to be found. Not at rehearsals, not working with the dancers. She seems to have just vanished. And meantime, Doug is so financially strapped that American National Ballet ends up laying off nearly half of the recently hired dancers.
It's all fine and well to conceive of an amazing, ambitious dance company. It's great, but if you can't deliver it, somebody's going to get hurt. And the dancers, certainly in this case, are the ones who got hurt the most.
The very next day, after half the company's dancers are let go, Ashley suddenly reappears. Not in person, but in a post on social media, writing in part, I publicly disavow my support for American National Ballet, and adding, I'm no longer associated with this organization in any way.
I was horrified. I didn't know all of the things that were falling apart behind the scenes. I didn't see it coming. I no longer wanted to be part of it.
Ashley left the scene, and then Doug abandoned the scene. He's like, one day he just wasn't there anymore. The organization evaporated.
People were mad. People were very angry. Because losing your job in ballet is not like, okay, I'm gonna go on Indeed and see what's, who's hiring. You're kind of locked out for the year until the next audition season.
American National Ballet has hurt everyone. You can't make promises and not live up to them because there are people's livelihoods that are involved. There are people's dreams that are involved.
Some fault Doug for mismanaging the ballet, and others blame Ashley for disappearing.
Ashley's absence from the ballet company was a very significant basis for the failure. She was the face of this company. When she left, the dancers, they didn't have anything.
But Ashley says there's a reason she left Charleston and the ballet behind. She claims she had to, that her very life depended on it.
He pulled the gun out and started waving it around.
I was living a nightmare. It was terrifying. It was like two different people, and I never knew which Doug I was gonna get.
In less than a year, Doug and Ashley Benefield's American National Ballet goes bust. What very few people knew, though, was that behind the scenes, the same was happening to the couple's marriage.
Doug always explained to me that the biggest factor of growing tensions at home was the conflict between Ashley and Eva.
I felt like Ashley would try and act like my mom and tell me what to do. And I was like, you were less than 10 years older than me.
Ashley says while American National Ballet is getting up and running, Doug and her arguments over Eva and the ballet become more frequent, aggressive, even scary.
He would yell and scream and cuss. It was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Things would be happy and okay one moment, and then the next minute he was out of control.
I never really saw a shift in their relationship, but that's also because I was trying to stay out of it as much as possible. I said, okay, if my dad's happy, I'm happy.
On June 15, 2017, Eva is out of the house when a heated argument between Doug and Ashley quickly escalates.
He pulled the gun out and started waving it around. He threw the gun at me. He said that if I left, that he was going to kill himself.
I begged him not to. And then he pulled the trigger. And the bullet went into the ceiling.
At a legal hearing the couple will later attend, you can hear Doug's own voice as he describes this incident. While he doesn't deny the argument or firing his 9mm, he disputes Ashley's characterization of the fight.
You did discharge the gun into the ceiling, correct?
Yeah, I did. It was a horrible decision.
She says, he then threw the gun at me. That didn't happen, did it?
No, I did not throw the gun at her. I just kind of spun in the chair and threw it against the wall.
She says, Doug then grabbed the gun again and held it to his own head, threatening to kill myself. Did you do that?
No, I did not.
Ashley says at another point during that same argument, Doug physically abuses the family dog.
He hit Sully.
Your dog.
Sully got between us and he punched him.
At that same 2018 hearing, Doug tells a different version of this story to Ashley's attorney.
You also punched the dog the day that you discharged the firearm?
He jumped up in my lap. He's a big dog. I admit I hit him. I didn't hit him like you would, hit a punching bag or anything, but I hit him. But yes, I was probably too physical with him.
Were you beginning to rethink the marriage?
After he shot the gun in the house, that's when I really realized that I had a problem and I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what was coming next.
What comes next for the couple is a bit surprising. A celebration of marriage 9 months after their initial hasty I-dos.
They had a wedding ceremony right after that. Everyone's smiling. She's smiling.
People had already booked their tickets and everyone was coming. And I didn't want them to see that part of my life. I felt like a failure. I didn't know what else to do.
Even with their turbulent marriage, Doug and Ashley decide they want to have a child together. In August, you find out you're pregnant. What do you think initially?
I was scared. It was supposed to be like a happy thing, but my heart dropped. I'm like, what am I supposed to do?
Here again, Doug's story differs from Ashley's.
It wasn't an accident, of course, that she got pregnant. It was planned. Doug had had a vasectomy years ago. Ashley paid with her own credit card for Doug to have a vasectomy reversal, and they then started to try to get pregnant.
One thing both sides do agree on, Ashley had a difficult pregnancy.
It was rough.
Morning sickness?
Yeah, and it wasn't even morning sickness. It was like around the clock sickness. I couldn't eat. He couldn't take care of me. And he drove me down to Florida and dropped me off at my mom's house.
Doug's life is a whirlwind. He's got his hands full in Charleston with the ballet company and raising his teen daughter, Eva. And he's spending his free time driving to Florida to be with Ashley. The two are in constant communication.
Doug was driving back and forth to take care of his family, spread across these two states. And he had to also be back in Charleston because on September 18th, this was going to be the big launch of the American National Ballet. Ashley was not going to be able to be present for the launch, supposedly because she was so sick.
But at that very moment, what Doug doesn't know is that Ashley and her mom are driving from Florida to Charleston, not to attend the ballet launch, but for an entirely different reason. On September 18th, you decided to move your belongings out of Doug's home.
Yeah.
She wrote a note alleging some things were wrong in the house and that there had been some abuse or at least violence on his part and that she was therefore leaving him.
Ashley writes, "Do not harass or try to follow me or I will call the police," and then goes on to say, "I will talk with you only via text, and do not call me or my mom. We will not pick up."
He was completely stunned. He had no idea Ashley was leaving him.
Just after learning that his wife is leaving him, Doug is again blindsided by a restraining order, barring him from contacting Ashley. The expectant dad then hires family attorney Stephanie Murphy to act as an intermediary.
Doug wanted to be present for the birth if Ashley felt comfortable. I sent the letter to Ashley asking, can Doug be part of the birth?
But Murphy says shortly after sending that letter, Ashley gives birth to a baby girl named Emerson, 3 weeks before her due date. Did you tell Doug?
No, there was a restraining order, so I couldn't legally have contact with him.
But he's the father of the child.
Yeah. Yep.
Did you intend for him to find out?
I mean, I knew he would eventually.
Doug didn't know that Ashley had given birth. He learned through an injunction that she filed that the child had been born, and that was several weeks after the child had been born.
Doug's not on the birth certificate. She didn't even give Doug the respect of naming his daughter Benefield. She gave the baby's last name as her grandfather's name. He was devastated. He was devastated that he missed the birth of his child and that he was not able to see her.
But Ashley says she was only doing what any mother would do. She believed that Doug was a danger, not only to her, but to her newborn daughter, too.
At first, I attributed it to morning sickness, but I started to wonder if there was more to it.
Every morning, you would make sure she drank the tea. Why? Why was that so important that she drink the tea?
It's April 2018. Ashley Benefield is a new mom, changing diapers, nursing her infant daughter. And at the same time, she's filing court papers seeking a protection order against her husband and the father of her baby, Doug Benefield.
So it would just basically put up a wall between Ashley and Doug.
It's not just that incident with the gun and the dog. Medical records suggest that she was in good health. Still, she says she had a growing suspicion that the terrible morning sickness she had wasn't just a routine part of her pregnancy. She wondered whether she was being poisoned by Doug.
It seemed like crazy and far-fetched, but I realized that the tea that he had been giving me if I didn't drink it, he would get really mad at me. And I started to wonder if he was doing something to the tea.
She started telling me every morning he would make sure she drank the tea. Why? Why was that so important that she drink the tea?
I did some toxicology testing through hair testing.
And what did it reveal?
That I had been poisoned.
The results from the lab Ashley privately hires for her hair test show extremely high levels of heavy metals like aluminum, barium, tin. The tests on baby Emerson also detect toxic metals. So you're thinking that your husband, the man who loved you and seemed to adore you, would poison you?
Yeah.
Why?
I didn't know why.
Ashley says she became so concerned for her health that she resorted to some pretty serious measures, including more than 20 sessions inside a hyperbaric chamber like this one, along with her infant daughter. Ashley says her hope was that this high-pressure environment would help detoxify their blood. She insists that her fear that Doug had tried to poison them was real. Others call it fiction.
Doug never poisoned Ashley. Never. I read the allegations and I thought, oh my God, this is crazy.
Doug's family attorney points to those medical records during and after Ashley's pregnancy, showing her to be in good health.
The day after the baby was born, she was breastfeeding the baby. So which is it? Are you poisoned to the point that you are full of heavy metals, or are you okay and therefore you're going to breastfeed your baby? There's always been holes in the story.
A judge agrees, siding with Doug and his toxicology expert who challenged Ashley's test results. Her request to keep Doug away from her and their child is denied.
There is not a single scintilla of credible evidence that Miss Benefield has ever been poisoned.
A judge didn't believe you.
Yeah. I started to just feel like maybe I was crazy. Maybe it was all in my head.
So now Doug Benefield has moved into an apartment in Florida as the couple attempts to co-parent Emerson.
But things started to deteriorate. He was becoming very possessive and controlling again.
Doug has a tracking device put on Ashley's car, even hires a private investigator. His attorney says it wasn't unreasonable given Ashley's past allegations.
He never tried to hide the fact that he had put the tracker on the car. I think he wanted just to kind of figure out what's going on. Am I being lied to?
And then new concerns from Ashley.
She started coming home hurt. One day came back with her face very badly injured.
And what were you told?
He said that she was playing with bubbles and that she slipped and fell.
It was consistent with what happened. She fell on her face with a pacifier. Ashley, however, made another abuse allegation.
The sheriff's office and Child Protective Services investigate the claims and conclude that there are no indicators of injury or abuse.
None of these cases led to charges. The child protection team closed them without any findings, and then the sheriff's office closed them as unfounded.
Then, amidst all this tension, the Benefields make a decision that will confound everybody who knows them.
He had gotten a job in Maryland, and so we started talking about all moving.
Moving as a family to Maryland?
Not as a family, but moving, like together at the same time.
I was just stunned. I mean, and once again, Doug, what are you doing? She tried to ruin your life.
All along, Doug would tell everyone who knew him, I believe I can make this work.
How do you rationalize patching things up with a man who you think has been abusing your daughter?
He was her father. I wanted things to be as good as they could be.
But you know now that this sounds pretty dysfunctional.
Yeah. There didn't seem to be a good option.
So you're packing up. You're going to make this move. Doug comes over. Did you two begin arguing?
He was constantly going back to this idea that we had to live together, telling me that wasn't how God intended it. He just flipped out, and it just kept escalating.
Escalating, she says, to the point of no return.
When you take a good man and a woman who's manipulative at her professional level, he's not ever going to play chess with her and win.
That bedroom was empty, other than 2 handguns.
We found that suspicious.
I was extremely concerned about Ashley's safety. Ashley was about to knock down that house of cards.
I don't think he could have ever guessed what was going to happen to him.
And what happened?
I had my gun. I told him to stop. Sorry.
What led you to go for the gun?
I've never been so scared in my life.
The information that I had was that it was a domestic-related shooting. The husband was dead. The wife did the shooting, and she claimed self-defense.
Benefield's life is taking center stage at what's been dubbed the Black Swan murder trial.
Good morning, Miss Benefield.
There was always this little thought in the back of my head that said Ashley's going to do something to him.
She just said, my dad's dead, isn't he? And then she said she killed him. She killed him, didn't she?
Why would you have a loaded gun in the house and you've got a child?
There was a ticking clock. She was very, very afraid that Doug was going to take this child away from her.
This is all part of Ashley's crazy campaign to just annihilate Doug in every single way.
And starts moving his arm around. Well, show me. What was he doing?
We stand with Ashley! We stand with Ashley!
Even her own little daughter marching for her mom.
We stand with Ashley!
He told you he had killed his wife?
And he said that he could make me disappear too.
In the ballet world, it's known as the pas de deux, a duet, a step of two. For Ashley and Doug Benefield, a former ballerina and a businessman, their dance begins with a 13-day whirlwind courtship, plans to build a ballet company, and later, a baby. But the love affair turns dark and disturbing. Court battles, disputed allegations of poisoning, abuse. And in the finale, Doug and Ashley, seemingly about to reconcile and start anew, reach a sudden and tragic end.
What happened in the moments before the gunshots rang out in this Florida community in September of 2020 will be scrutinized for years by investigators, by lawyers, and the media.
Ashley Benefield has kept quiet about what she says happened that night until she sat down with me. How are you doing?
It depends on the moment. Just a lot of emotion, kind of like a roller coaster.
That roller coaster, Ashley says, took a sharp turn in the fall of 2020, when after 4 years of ups and downs, she and her husband, Doug, were preparing to move to Maryland. The plan, according to Ashley, was to continue living separately, just as they had in Florida.
He was constantly going back to this idea that we had to live together.
In these text messages from September 27th, the Benefields exchanged jokes, even emojis. Doug arrives at 5:30 with a U-Haul at the gated community where Ashley lives with her mom. Ashley's mom and daughter Emerson are out of the house at a nearby park. Ashley claims it isn't long before things go from friendly to fiery. Sounds like you guys are just agreeing to pack. And did you two begin arguing verbally? Was there yelling?
There was a back and forth.
She goes on to say that Doug becomes physically aggressive too, at one point bumping into her with a moving box and scraping her side. She then says she tries to diffuse the tension and asks him to leave.
He ended up trapping me, and I tried to leave. He hit me.
Where did he hit you? Did he threaten you?
He said I couldn't leave. I almost made it to the front door and he stopped me. I ran to my bedroom and he followed me there. Told him to stop. Sorry.
What led you to go for the gun?
He had never hit me before. I thought he would stop if he saw it.
What did you think was about to happen?
I thought he was actually going to kill me this time.
Did he have a gun?
Not that I could see. He told me I was done. And even though I was the one holding the gun, he plunged at me. I'm sorry.
You fired 4 times. You missed him twice. And when you hit him, what did you think?
I ran.
Ashley says she races out of her house over to a neighbor's home. 2 residents who were out walking their dog who heard the shots described seeing a woman frantically running from the home.
Maine County 911, what is the emergency?
Okay, it's right next door to me. She just came over. Her strange husband attacked her, and she says she shot him.
Okay, what's his name?
His name is Doug Benefield.
They said that Doug attacked me and I shot him. It was all a blur.
Did you think you had killed him?
I didn't know if he was behind me or chasing me or what. I didn't know.
I don't know. She came in. She was quite hysterical. I didn't know who was banging on my door. Said that he attacked her, and she shot him.
And at the end of that call, even though the neighbor had never seen Doug or Ashley fight, he tells the dispatcher something alarming.
Just between you and me, the son of a bitch has been harassing him and threatening him for a long time.
Okay.
I probably shouldn't say that.
When law enforcement first arrived at the house following the 911 call, and they make it in the house, they find Doug.
He had a gunshot wound to his calf through and through. He had a gunshot wound to his right side chest area that landed in his back across on the left-hand side. Paramedics arrived, they continued CPR and took him to the hospital, but he was pronounced deceased at the hospital.
This is the man that you had loved, the father of your child. What did you make of it when you heard that he was dead?
I was horrified. It's like the worst nightmare.
A nightmare Ashley won't wake up from anytime soon.
That bedroom was essentially empty, other than 2 handguns.
One of them was in a backpack, hanging in the closet. One of them was just in a bin on top of a hamper. And we found that suspicious.
I think that definitely gave the detectives pause.
There was always this little thought in the back of my head that said Ashley's gonna do something to him. Ashley's gonna sabotage him somehow. There's a look in her eyes where she just looks like she finally got her way.
I remember thinking to myself, there's something wrong here.
Every morning, Doug reached out to Eva no matter where he was in the world.
He would either text me a good morning or he would send me a Bible verse. So I expected that.
And that morning, he didn't send it.
Or I texted him like 10 times. And then I said, Dad, this is scaring me.
Monday morning, I was in the office and I saw an email that Ashley's attorney Since said, we need to cancel Wednesday's hearing. Doug is dead. I had to call Doug's family. It was just heart-wrenching. Poor girl, I mean, she knew. She just said, my dad's dead, isn't he? And then she said, she killed him. She killed him, didn't she?
And I sat my phone down and I said, I don't have parents anymore. I was just shaking violently for like 6 hours.
Doug Benefield's family and friends are grappling with unthinkably tragic news. And meantime, investigators are trying to make sense of what happened the night before.
The information that I had was that it was a domestic-related shooting. The husband was dead, the wife did the shooting, and she claimed self-defense.
Ashley is taken to the sheriff's office, where attorneys from her family court case are waiting. You didn't give a statement. Why not?
My attorney is yelling to me in the parking lot. You know, don't say anything, don't say anything. I guess I was just following advice.
Ashley does consent to photos that she says document the swelling on her face where she says Doug hit her.
When I saw her that night after she left the police station, the left side of her face was swollen. She had obviously been struck. The next morning when she was changing a shirt, I saw the cut on her stomach.
But law enforcement contends that Ashley's injuries don't suggest a life or death struggle.
There was no swelling, there was no bruising, there was no difference in the way she looked. The entirety of the injuries that they found that were relevant was a scratch on her side, and that was it. They got pictures of every angle, of every place that the attorneys wanted them to take, and there were no injuries except for that scratch.
And investigators are also skeptical of Ashley's claims of being attacked because Doug was unarmed. She had access to 2 weapons. You said that you were a responsible gun owner, but why would you have a loaded gun in the house and you've got a child?
Well, the purpose of having a gun is for like a self-defense. The idea is that if something were to happen crazy in the middle of the night, that it would be accessible.
But then you've got a loaded gun that's basically sort of out in a bin. There are those who say that sounds really suspicious.
I mean, I feel like anything can be turned to try to make it look a certain way.
We found that suspicious, that someone would have 2 guns readily accessible in an empty room when everything else is in a U-Haul truck.
According to the medical examiner's report, the fatal gunshot entered the right side of Doug Benefield's chest. To investigators, that doesn't fit with somebody who's lunging toward her.
If someone were coming at you or attacking you, the entrance wound to the fatal shot would not be in the side.
And results from the forensic lab raise even more questions about Ashley's claim of self-defense.
And there was no stippling on Doug's shirt, so that told us that the barrel of the gun was at least 3 to 7 feet away, and that's the barrel of the gun, not even her body. So they were not in a combat life or death situation where they were locked together.
Just over a month after Doug Benefield is shot and killed, Ashley is charged with second-degree murder. She pleads not guilty.
The Manatee County woman charged with shooting and killing her husband.
Suspect for second-degree murder and the...
You're arrested. Charged with Doug's murder. What did you think?
I was shocked. I was blindsided by it.
In the minds of investigators, Doug Benefield's demise wasn't about self-defense. To them, it was Ashley's plan all along.
The whole lie, the whole deception is coming to an end.
Doug was going to find out your wife is lying to you.
There was a ticking clock. She was very, very afraid that Doug was going to take this child away from her. Very afraid.
But others insist the real victim here is Ashley.
Doug Benefield was anything but what he portrayed himself to be.
This is someone who is a predator, and this is someone who was not going to be stopped.
He told me that he killed Renee.
He told you he had killed his wife?
And he said that he could make me disappear too.
I always try to go and sit and watch the sunset when I can. There's so many good memories there. We chose to spread my dad's ashes on station 22.5, and that is the same station that my parents met.
We held a celebration. We raised a toast to a life well lived and a terrible ending to a life.
A life Doug's family insists was cut short by a woman they say was driven to destroy him.
No one at that memorial service in any way believed the story of Doug attacking Ashley, her shooting him out of fear. Doug still loved Ashley in spite of what she did to him, in spite of all the accusations, all the allegations.
I said, why do you keep going back? And he said, you know, I just want to show her that, like, I'm a good man and men can be good. And then he wanted Emerson to have a happy family.
He was willing to do whatever he had to do to be a part of Emerson's life.
And while it appears to some that the couple were trying for yet another fresh start, their family court case in Florida was still open. Both Ashley and Doug had been evaluated by a psychologist, and that report was completed just before the planned move to Maryland. Prosecutors insist the report about Ashley is crucial, that once released, Doug was going to learn that she had no intention of reconciling.
Ashley was afraid that Doug was going to take custody away from her. This is a judge that did not believe her theatrics, and if anyone was going to do it, it was going to be this judge.
And prosecutors believe the move to Maryland offers Ashley another chance and another court to keep Doug away from her and their child.
I believe that she was going to start everything again in Maryland and hope for a different result.
Were you thinking at all, you've got another state you can try to fight him for custody?
My hope was that if something was going wrong, that maybe in a fresh place, they would take it more seriously.
Ashley's mindset leading up to the shooting, prosecutors say, is critical. Was this a woman who truly feared for her life?
Text messages between Doug and Ashley leading up to that day, in the days ahead, and then the day of the homicide were very normal.
To say that someone couldn't have been defending themselves later in a day because of nice text messages that morning is absurd. Doug was always like a flip of a switch.
He could turn on a dime. He could be very happy. He could be charming. But then, for no reason at all, he could get very upset. We kept on asking for help. It's been years of absolute hell. And we went from one abuser to a system that is abusing a victim.
Were you an abused woman?
Yeah, I didn't think so at first. I remember like trying to argue, no, like it's not like that. You know, I don't have broken bones and black eyes.
Most incidents of domestic violence are subtle, where the offender uses isolation, financial control, threatening, verbal abuse, things that the general public doesn't necessarily see. But these are also things that the victim doesn't always know is abuse.
There was no evidence to indicate that she was truly a victim of abuse in the months leading up to the homicide when they were not even living together.
In the months before the shooting, Ashley reaches out to a domestic violence agency and eventually connects with a therapist, Dr. Barbara Russell, who becomes a trusted friend and advocate.
This relationship was very controlling. He was incessantly sending her text messages saying that all of the men that are probably flirting with her need to be exterminated like rats. And then he would shift gears and talk to her very lovingly and sweetly. Like most domestic violence situations, it escalated. He would push her, he would lock her in bathrooms.
During one of those alleged incidents early in their relationship, Ashley claims Doug admitted something about his late wife that terrified her.
He had always told me that they had this fairy tale marriage, that they never fought. And then I found messages.
Text messages, she says, reveal a side of Doug that Ashley claims she saw in her own marriage.
She said one time he kicked her really hard. He had secretly videotaped them starting on their honeymoon. One time we were having an argument and he told me that he killed Renee.
He told you he had killed his wife?
And he said that he could make me disappear too.
An investigation was done. There was no finding of foul play in any way. There was a full autopsy.
The coroner in Renee's death investigation ruled that she died of natural causes due to a heart condition.
Ashley tried to convince me that my dad killed my mom. I said, Dad, this is what she's doing. She was just kind of like, we're going to therapy where, things will be okay. Obviously, I didn't kill your mom.
This was all part of Ashley's crazy campaign. Ashley wanted to keep Doug away from that kid at the expense of everything and everyone else. She would not stop.
Her goal was never to get rid of Doug. Her goal was to keep her daughter safe. That's very different than wanting to kill somebody.
Two starkly different portraits of Ashley Benefield. Is she a murderer?
Benefield taking center stage at what has been dubbed the Black Swan murder trial.
Or a victim who stood her ground.
He told her she was finished.
He's coming at you and you have nowhere to go. What do? You shoot to protect yourself.
A legal strategy that could keep Ashley free.
This is the one chance at this point that we have to end it all now.
We stand with Ashley, mother, daughter, sister, friend.
All right, here, how about I push you this way? You ready? Yeah.
So what's summer been like for you two?
Emerson does a lot of swimming, right?
Yeah, I can swim alone pretty much.
So you're getting to be a strong swimmer.
Great job.
Ashley Benefield has spent several years under house arrest, living with her mom and daughter Emerson, who's now 5, while awaiting trial for second-degree murder.
Here we are, climbing trees, catching geckos.
This has been hanging, in the balance really for years now. And in the same time, you're trying to mother.
It definitely wouldn't be what I would pick, but I'm thankful for all the good things that we have. She's an amazing little girl. I love being her mommy.
Meanwhile, the other daughter, caught in the middle, 22-year-old Eva Benefield, found her own way to process her pain.
When I was 15, my mom died of an underlying heart condition.
I had been on TikTok for a few months, and I thought, oh, that'd be funny if I made a joke about my dad being murdered. I made a TikTok, and I put my phone down, and I went to bed, and I woke up, and it was at 700,000 likes. And then it just kept going and going and going. It got 3 million likes and 10 million views. And within 2 weeks, I had 100,000 followers.
Eva has gone from grieving and stuck in trauma to getting help to finding an outlet in her art.
Eva, Doug's daughter, does not support you. Do you want to say anything to her?
My heart's broken for her. She has been through so much. I wouldn't even know where to start.
In February 2023, Ashley's legal team files a motion to dismiss under Florida's Stand Your Ground law. The law allows the use of deadly force if a person believes that that force is necessary to prevent imminent death or to prevent a violent crime without any expectation to retreat.
Doug stopped her from fleeing her home. Well, that would be false imprisonment, and that would qualify as a violent felony, which would give her the right to use deadly force.
Ashley's defense filed a 105-page motion presenting her version of the night she shot Doug. For his family, it was the first time hearing her side.
The story they've made up is as implausible as everything else she ever made up about Doug and their relationship. It's implausible that any of that occurred the way she and her lawyer have told it.
The court found enough merit in Ashley's motion to grant her a hearing. Now the burden of proof shifts to the state to prove that Ashley did not act in self-defense.
The prosecution has to basically put on a trial, but it's just a hearing in front of a judge.
Well, with this hearing, we have the opportunity to put a stop to the proceedings. Then I get my life back.
Doug's family travels to Florida to attend the hearing.
It feels a little weird just because the last time I was here was when my dad was alive.
All right, good morning, everyone. We are on the record in the state of Florida versus Ashley Benefield.
The state calls 8 witnesses, including Doug's family members and law enforcement, who testify that Ashley had no significant injuries to justify self-defense.
Did you have a crime scene technician take photographs of her?
We did.
And why did you want pictures?
I didn't notice any kind of injuries, things that you would typically see during a physical altercation.
For their part, the defense relied solely on the details laid out in the 105-page motion filed before the hearing, calling no witnesses.
There was no independent evidence that refuted her version of events. I believe this motion compels the court to grant it. Thank you for the court's patience.
Judge didn't rule from the bench. They typically do not. After the hearing ended, we just had to wait for a written order.
It would take 2 months, but ultimately the judge would deny Ashley Benefield's Stand Your Ground motion, saying the state had shown the shooting was not in self-defense. Now, out of options, Benefield will have to face a jury of her peers in this courthouse.
And happening right now, potential jurors being questioned in what people are calling the Black Swan trial.
The Black Swan trial.
Black Swan murder trial.
The Black Swan has a catchy ring, and it sensationalizes my life. And it's sad to me that people who don't even know me have this idea of a monster.
But not everybody sees her that way.
We stand with Ashley!
We stand with Ashley!
Dozens of protesters here at the Manatee County Courthouse marching in defense of Ashley Benefield.
And the littlest supporter marching out there also happens to be one of Ashley's biggest defenders.
She kept on asking, Mommy, can I go? Can I go? I want to be part of this. I want to stand up for my mommy. I don't want to be without my mommy. And
With Ashley Benefield now facing the possibility of life in prison, the big question is, will the jury believe her?
The entire dynamic of the trial shifting today as Ashley Benefield made her way to the stand.
The stakes for Ashley were extremely high.
I was hoping that they would call Ashley.
There's nowhere to go. I was trapped.
I really just wanted them to see Ashley for Ashley.
I thought he was gonna kill me.
testimony in the so-called Black Swan murder trial happening in Manatee County.
Supporters rallying behind Ashley Benefield. Benefield is the Manatee County woman charged with shooting and killing her husband, Doug Benefield.
After nearly 4 years, Ashley Benefield finally gets her day in court, where she's hoping to prove that she shot her husband, Doug, in self-defense.
This was a custody battle that this mother was going to win at all costs. And the cost was the life of Doug Benefield. And that is murder.
All right, state, call your first witness.
The prosecution gets to work building its case.
State calls Stephanie Murphy.
Calling Doug Benefield's family attorney to the stand.
At the time the child was born, did you or Doug know that the child was born?
No, gosh, we didn't know for a good 5 or 6 weeks after she was born.
All right, who's your next witness?
Detective Chris Gillum.
All right.
The state also calls the detective who spoke with Ashley back in 2018 when he investigated her claims that Doug had abused their daughter.
She asked for me to arrest Doug when he came inside the courtroom in front of the presiding judge.
And what was your reaction to that?
That absolutely would not occur.
And how did she take that?
She was upset.
I think it was very important testimony. It was a snapshot into the real Ashley Benefield.
Her tone turned very aggressive, and she says, "You will arrest him in front of the judge, and I will make sure you do it." And she says, "I'll do whatever I have to do to keep my baby, you a-hole."
Ashley's side insists she was only trying to protect her child from a man she was terrified of.
Defense would call Dr. Jason Quintel.
They call a mental health counselor who saw both Doug and Ashley.
Did you conclude whether there was an intimidation issue present?
Ashley stated that she was scared of Doug.
Did you reach any conclusions with respect to Douglas Benefield?
Doug occurred as someone who was domineering and the terminology that I would use at times would be super controlling. He would fit the stereotype of an alpha male, in my opinion.
The defense also turns to a domestic violence expert to explain why, even though Ashley claimed she was living in fear, it may not have always looked that way from the outside.
How common is it, Mr. Ferris, for a victim of domestic violence to smile and act happy in the company of the abuser?
Very much so, because they're afraid. They found this least resistance. They're trying to not poke the bear, as we'll say.
Doug didn't verbally abuse her, never physically touched her. He would be angry over how she tried to ruin his life, but the anger never came out in inappropriate ways.
Then the defense calls the one person they believe can convince the jury of Ashley's innocence.
The defense calls Ashley Benefield. How are you feeling this morning, Ashley?
Nervous.
The questioning quickly turning to the night of the shooting.
I ran to try to leave the house. He hit me on the side of the head. He had never actually hit me before.
What did you do?
I ran. Doug was standing in the doorway. His face was red. Like the veins were bulging in his neck. The way he was looking at me, it didn't even look like Doug. His eyes were black. I held the gun like in front of me and I said, "Stop." And he like turned and he got into this like a fighting stance. I thought he was gonna kill me.
Somehow, Ashley Benefield found the strength to testify on her own behalf. And I thought she did it extremely well. Judge, I wonder, could we have a minute?
Ashley used a lot of theatrics, a lot of, in my opinion, acting. Looking her in the face, it did not seem genuine to me.
Ma'am, there's Kleenexes here next to you. Those.
Okay, thank you.
Even though she cried hysterically numerous times, there was not one tear.
In her cross-examination, prosecutor Suzanne O'Donnell presses Ashley about that moment she says Doug hit her in the head.
You say he slapped you?
I wouldn't know how to classify it. He struck me, he hit me.
Was his hand open or closed?
I don't remember.
Okay. In direct examination, she knew the color of his eyes and the way he was acting. And when I asked her, did he hit you with an open hand or a closed hand, she didn't know. Wouldn't you know if someone hit you with a fist versus an open hand? Judge, if I could have her step down so she can demonstrate.
You may.
I absolutely wanted to get her down off of the stand because she would have been that much closer to the jury. Okay, so he's standing there. He turns to like this and starts moving his arms around.
Like that.
Well, show me. What was he doing?
Kind of like, I don't know, he got like this, and he was like making like fighting motions. I don't know, I'm not a fighter, I don't know.
Okay. This was the time to show the jury exactly what this person was doing. Why were you so scared? And she just couldn't do it. And I believe that that was because it didn't really happen.
And O'Donnell zeroes in on the physical evidence, arguing that it contradicts Ashley's claims of self-defense.
So I want to talk a little bit about this trajectory. The fatal bullet went in the side of the chest and almost came out the other side of the back. Her story was he starts to lunge at her. If she then lifted the gun and shot, it would go in his chest and right out his back. It would not go side to side.
Everybody unanimously agreed that the wound path of that projectile was from front to back, left to right. Well, I don't care how much you would like to move front to back to the side, it is still front to back. Ashley's action on that day was absolutely justified. She had the right to stand her ground and use force, including deadly force. For the last several years, I've walked hand in hand with Ashley. I'm now going to surrender her fate to you.
So all of you may now retire to consider your verdict.
Any minute now, Ashley Benefield could learn her fate.
I've played out, I guess, both scenarios in my mind.
6 hours into the deliberations, tensions begin building in the jury room.
And then at approximately 10 o'clock, the jurors sent out a note.
When they came back, I feel a sinking feeling. We were heavy-hearted at that moment.
Are you envisioning what it might be like to hear guilty?
Yeah, I've played out, I guess, both scenarios in my mind. I mean, part of this just doesn't seem real. I keep thinking maybe one day I'll wake up from the nightmare and realize that none of this happened.
Jurors still deliberating after closing arguments.
It's 10 p.m. The jury in Ashley Benefield's case has been deliberating for 6 hours. Then, a message from the foreperson.
Yeah, I've received a note from you. It says, unable to come to unanimous verdict.
Even worse than a not guilty would be a hung jury, because then the family has to go through this again. We just need some finality.
But the judge encourages the jurors to keep deliberating and try to come to a consensus.
We'll be in recess until we get another question or a verdict.
And less than an hour later...
Breaking news, we have a verdict.
When I saw that there was a verdict a half an hour later, my heart was in my throat.
We, the jury, find the defendant is guilty of manslaughter, a lesser included offense.
The jury does not find Ashley guilty of second-degree murder. Instead, they convict her of the lesser charge of manslaughter.
We were hopeful for a second-degree murder conviction, but we were very, very satisfied with a manslaughter conviction.
Ashley learns she'll be sentenced at a later date.
The sound was as good as the sight. We're very thankful that she was taken off to jail.
If she hadn't had her gun that night, I know without a shadow of a doubt my daughter would be dead. I am sure of it. Why do they not believe women? Why should women live in fear?
I feel that Ashley was abusing a system that is designed to help people that are victims. Sets everyone back and makes it so much harder for those people that really are victims.
But I'll tell you, the hardest part of that verdict was not in the courtroom. It was when we came back to our office without Ashley. Emerson was there waiting for her mom, but she wouldn't leave right around that elevator. She just stayed there.
This case has always been sad to me because there are children involved that had nothing to do with this. Emerson's without her father and probably going to be without her mother now for a long time. Doug's family got justice. Eva's still without her father.
Today kind of just feels like the first day of the rest of my life.
I hope one day me and Emerson will be able to have a relationship where she can come to me with any questions, and I hope that one day I'll be able to explain how great of a father my dad would have been to her and how great he was for the short amount of time that they got to spend together.
Ashley Benefield is scheduled to be sentenced next month. David, she faces up to 30 years in prison.
And as for Doug and Ashley's 6-year-old daughter, Emerson, she's currently living with Ashley's mother now. That's our program for tonight. Thanks for watching. I'm David Muir.
And I'm Deborah Roberts. From all of us here at 2020 and ABC News, good night.
When you hear there's a murder, it can frighten people.
I was so shocked that something like that would happen in a lovely village like this.
They seemed to be happy with each other, everyone loved her, and she got along with everyone.
There were concerns about her welfare. The alarm bells were raised.
They had heard things happening, shouting, fights.
It was weird. It's as if he was trying to tell us something.
He went off on what can only be described as a drink and drugs binge. Ultimately, it led to the tragic death of a lovely, caring wife.
A lovely woman who was taken away from us by a horrible, sadistic man.
Situated in the stunning rolling wolds of North Lincolnshire lies the peaceful village of Worleby.
I've lived in Worleby for 48 years. It's a really nice, quiet village. Everybody seems to know everybody. We get on really well.
Last year, we won the best kept village. It's a nice little village, plenty of activities, plenty going on.
It's so quiet, it's a little rural idyll, if you like. It's like going back in time living here. There's very little crime, it's beautiful, and it's a wonderful place to live for young families or retired people, and we've got all of them here.
Friendly community, everybody seems like pretty much okay, you know.
There's a lot of people who help each other, so there is quite a lot of good community atmosphere.
And it is a lovely place to live. It's really nice.
So it's the ideal place for Ian Hamer and wife Joanne to set up home.
We're fairly new to the village. I think they've only been here about 5 years in total.
I think I met her once. She seemed a really nice lady.
Joanne in particular seems to throw herself into village life.
Joanne was liked by everyone on the road. Outgoing, always out on the streets, speaking to each other. Ian, you would never see. He would be in his home quite a lot. Joanne, complete opposite. Everyone loved her, a really welcoming woman, and she got along with everyone. And so people wanted to open up to her, and that's why I think she quickly integrated into Worleby and loved living there.
Joanne also has a successful career at the local council where she manages their healthy lifestyle service. After 6 years there, she's risen to become the public face of their healthy living campaigns.
She was quite a bright, some would say brilliant person who had a quite substantial job working with the local authority and really independently minded in some respects.
Just a lovely woman who did wonders for the council. Everyone loved her at the council and no one had a bad word to say about her.
Ian Hamer, Joanne's husband of 27 years, works as a self-employed business consultant.
He worked in many businesses and earning money here and there. And to sustain a reasonable living, you know, he had a nice place in Worlby, quite an expensive area to live in, so he must have been doing okay in his profession, I guess. They seemed to be happy with each other. Friends and family said that there was a good couple for the large part. Married a long time, nice family, 3 kids. It was all seemingly going well.
But what seems like an idyllic life is about to change.
Humberside Police, what's your emergency?
Humberside Police are called after Joanne fails to turn up for work. Her elderly mother has also been trying to reach her, to no avail.
They did speak most days, if not every day, because her mother was very ill as well. And Joanne used to help to look after her. And that raised sufficient concern for her to ring the police.
There were concerns about her welfare. The alarm bells were raised.
And a concern for welfare incident was generated, which resulted in the police attending.
Police make their way over to the family home. When they knock on the door, there's no answer. So the officers break in. When they search through the house, nothing could prepare police for what they find in the master bedroom. Joanne Hamer's lying lifeless on her bed.
Medical professionals will have been called immediately. You know, monitors would have been placed on to see if there's any signs of heart trace or anything. Any chance whatsoever that resuscitation could take place.
They had discovered she was dead. It's apparent she'd been killed from the scene, the way she was left, and there was blood at the scene as well.
Joanne had been strangled by her dressing gown cord.
That's when we're looking at securing evidence within that scene.
Teams of police descend on Worlby. The quiet village has never seen anything like it.
When I came back from work, there was police cars, vans, and I'm saying, what's going on? What on earth are all the police doing here? Something happened, and then when I got home and my daughter texted me and said she'd seen it, that there'd been a murder. I just couldn't believe it. I was so shocked that something like that would happen in a lovely village like this. You don't expect it.
As word spreads fast through the neighbourhood, the local newspaper gets wind of an incident in Worlby. Reporter Charlie Wilson heads to the scene.
So you're like, OK, we've got a big story. Let's get there first. Let's be quick. Let's be first. So we got down there. We were the first people there. Very quickly, it was evident this could be a very serious, scary incident. I've never reported on a murder before. That's the first time that's happened to me. So it was a case of doing it really delicately, respectfully, and just trying to build up what had happened, really.
Soon, the news is spreading beyond the boundaries of the village.
Maybe an hour later, you get the likes of ITV, BBC, Sky coming down, and that's when it was like, whoa, OK, people out on the road, like, wondering what's going on. Yeah, everyone was shocked to see the amount of media attention.
You just don't get this sort of thing in these sort of villages.
Yeah, I was quite shocked, really. You would never think that something would happen in a small community like this. I couldn't believe it.
Everybody was shocked. It didn't seem right. Something like that would happen here. You hear about it in cities, but in a little quiet Lincolnshire village, you just don't expect it at all.
Joanne's family are left devastated by the news, and her colleagues at work are also reeling.
Truly sad. I spoke to a few of them. They were just in pieces. Of course they would be. Their colleague who they loved dearly, and they really did love her. It was tough for him, it was very tough.
And it dawns on Joe's village that there's a killer living in their midst.
I think some people were a little bit upset. They were locking the doors a bit more quickly. I think the first reaction is alarm, because when you hear there's a murder but you don't know the circumstances, and it can frighten people into thinking we've got a killer at large who's going to cause more trouble. You're quite fearful about what it could mean and what the implications for the future are.
It was very awful to hear that it had happened in our village. It's frightening, it really is.
With fear spreading quickly throughout the village, Humberside Police needs to work fast to establish who committed this horrendous crime. And first, they look at Joanne's home life.
This marriage on the surface, to all intents and purposes, would have looked like a stable, normal marriage without too many problems. The reality was quite different.
What I heard was that their marriage wasn't great by the people on the road who lived there, because they had heard things happening, let's just say, whether it be shouting, fights.
It turns out Joanne and Ian had recently had a trial separation, but then Joanne decided to return to the family home.
Joanne Hamer had sought to see if she could give the relationship one last chance. This was part of her trying to make the relationship work.
This new information puts husband Ian in a new light.
Maybe Joanne tried to keep certain things to herself to hide what was really going on at the home to save her marriage.
With Ian Hamer nowhere to be seen, police suspicions are starting to build.
We do know in this particular case that a neighbour had reported an argument in the morning between them.
I spoke to the woman who heard the incident around 4 o'clock in the morning, around that time. She had heard screams, shouts for help.
And then the argument ceased.
Police launch an urgent public appeal to help them find Joanne's husband. They need to track down Ian Hamer, and fast. In the quiet Lincolnshire village of Werleby, police have launched a murder hunt. Mother of 3, Joanne Hamer, has been found strangled in her bed. Husband Ian has mysteriously disappeared since a row reported by neighbours in the early hours of the morning. And this doesn't seem to be the first, either.
I guess people on the road had heard these things where it really went bad, to say the least. None of the neighbours who I spoke to liked him at all.
With Ian Hamer now under suspicion, Humberside Police make an urgent appeal for his whereabouts. They release the details of his car, a white BMW 5 Series. They also warn the public not to approach him.
Once a decision had been made by the senior investigating officer that Ian Hamer was a suspect for this crime, then a manhunt would have taken place. They don't know at the moment where he is, but there would be certain fast-track actions raised to secure his arrest. You know, checks with family and friends. Where does he usually go to? Where does he work? Checks with hospitals as well. If he's got a mobile phone, has he made any calls? We may be able to cell site to where he's located and instigate an area search. He's clearly got use of a vehicle in this case. So, you know, we've been putting the vehicle details onto the automatic number plate recognition, the ANPR system. And as soon as that vehicle passes an ANPR camera, then that will send an alert to the police. All these inquiries made to trace and arrest Ian Hamer.
He plainly was the last person with her and had disappeared from the scene. So the investigation then was focusing on building that picture around what had happened between them. And then going further back, what had happened between them, not just on that night, but also in the period leading up to this.
Detectives put Ian Hamer under the microscope.
The picture that emerged from witnesses was of somebody who was supremely self-assured, self-confident, and superficially was, or at least on the face of it, was somebody who was quite engaging and interesting. But those same people always spoke about, the more they got to know him, there appeared to be another side to him. And they also described how, over times, he could present as being very self-interested and, I suppose, conceited. So there was somebody who could, when he wanted to present in a way which was superficially attractive, but the more people got to know him, there was to him which was unattractive in terms of him being controlling, perhaps aggressive.
And after speaking to Joanne's family and friends, it turns out Hamer has a checkered history.
There have been a number of previous reports made indicating domestic violence. You know, he was reported to have ripped up her wedding dress.
Those reports of him tearing up a teddy bear, which was sentimental to her.
You know, this is really significant in a case such as this.
The police had been called out on many occasions, but as is so often the case, they weren't really ever progressed. Part of that was because of the approach of the family to try and manage what was happening within the family. The personality of Joanne Hamer was, tragically, to try and make it work at all times.
When you're married to someone for so long, you want to, make things work. And she shouldn't be wrongly thought about for wanting to make her marriage with her husband of 27 years and 3 children work. It's just that he was so far gone and so far twisted.
There are a number of occasions where she left him, but he managed to persuade her to come back. And I've investigated, sadly, domestic homicides where controlling and abusive husbands have tried to isolate their wives, and we know that Hamer did this and, dissuading her from contact with family and friends.
In 2013, police discover this came to a head when Ian Hamer started divorce proceedings, blaming the involvement of Joanne's mother in their relationship.
So, he was antagonistic towards his wife's relationship with her own mother. So he was all about controlling and being abusive towards his wife and driving a wedge between her and family and friends. And it just shows this controlling and coercive and bullying and domineering nature of Ian Hamer towards his wife within that relationship. And that isn't uncommon in domestic homicide cases, sadly.
It seems the couple reconciled. But then in 2017, things take another turn for the worse. Ian Hamer starts accusing his wife of having affairs. Police analysis of Joanne's smartphone reveals something even more sinister. Around this time, Hamer hacked into his wife's handset so he could track her every move.
He would apparently follow her to work, follow her on nights out with friends, monitor her phone on where she was going, where she was at, wouldn't let her do certain things, apparently, wear certain things, and she was a bit closed off.
This is how obsessive he was about his wife and his jealousy and his thought processes, that he wanted to accuse her of extramarital affairs.
And a probe of the couple's bank accounts shows Ian's disturbingly tight grip over her purse strings.
He was keeping money from her, basically, I guess sort of giving her an allowance of what to spend and what she could do, wouldn't let her go out at certain times. All the bearings of, a toxic, horrible relationship. Obviously, she felt trapped. She felt like she needed to get out, and she tried to do that. He wouldn't let her.
In the weeks before her death, Joanne had moved out and was considering buying a property. But she was persuaded by Ian to return, 2 days before her murder. It was on this day, the 4th of May, that police background checks reveal a disturbing incident. Ian Hamer had been arrested for drink driving.
As well as being controlling and abusive towards his wife, he seemed to be losing control of his own life in some respects. He was drinking more heavily. So there's a clear pattern there of his own destructive behaviour escalating within himself, and particularly abusing alcohol as part of that process.
Investigators discover it's not only drink that's fueling Hamer's abusive behaviour.
He had a cocaine problem that had become prevalent in his life over the last 2 or 3 years, and that became worse and worse and worse. When he picked up this addiction, maybe his personality changed because of that, and his health, mental and physical, deteriorated.
Businessman Ian Hamer's respectable lifestyle is now questionable. And when they learn what he did in the hours following the estimated time of Joanne's murder, they're convinced they have the right man. Soon after that last blazing row reported by neighbours, Joanne's mother said she had an unsettling phone call with her son-in-law.
When family members tried to contact her the following morning, he told them that Joanne Hamer couldn't speak to them because she was unwell, and as he framed it, she had a sore throat.
Chillingly, police believe Joanne was already dead when Hamer made that calculating comment.
Just, like, sick. Like, strangle her, and then you got to tell her mum that she can't come because she's got a bad throat. Like, sadistic. Like, horrible. When you hear that, it's just like, I don't know what to say. Horrible.
And it appears Hamer used the same story again.
His son had attended at the marital home at a time when Joanne Hamer was probably dead, and that's when he first introduced that concept of her having a sore throat when he knew she'd been strangled and she was probably dead.
He also told his son as well when he was at the house to go and buy some lozenges because his mother was sleeping, she had a bad throat, knowing full well that he'd strangled her, which now we know what happened, was particularly chilling in this case. To say that she'd got a bad throat, I mean, how callous is that?
And therefore the question is, whether was that him being cruel or was it him buying time?
This cunning ploy tells police they have a calculating killer on the run, who wants to stay one step ahead of them. But it's only a matter of time before a false move by Hamer would reveal where he's hiding. Worleby, North Lincolnshire. Murder suspect Ian Hamer is on the run after his wife Joanne is found strangled in their bedroom.
And this is a man who, at this point, everyone in the area is looking for and knows that, okay, this is a manhunt.
As police cast their search net wider, reporters like Charlie Wilson are on the ground looking for leads. Suddenly, that morning, there's word from nearby Barton upon Humber.
We heard news that there might be an incident in Barton where he might be. And so we went to Barton and then heard he was seen near a pub.
Barton is about 8 miles away, and it's quite big, quite a lot of people, so it's the obvious place to go. You've got the Humber Bridge. From the Humber Bridge, you've got the whole of Yorkshire to go into and disappear. It would be a logical place to go.
A resident next to one of the town's car parks spots a man behaving erratically.
He was basically swaying around in the car park, making noise, acting strange.
Not realising it's Humberside Police's most wanted, Ian Hamer, the woman calls 999 to report a disturbance.
I think she reported that he was on Spice and shouting. Obviously, he was actually drunk, intoxicated on whatever he was on. He would wander around the car park, shout.
A lone patrol officer heads to the car park to move this wild drunkard on.
Police basically just found a man shouting and being strange and realised this is Ian Hamer. Arrested him straight away.
The officer single-handedly tackles Hamer to the floor, then restrains him whilst he radios for assistance.
I have to say the actions of the officer that arrested him were exemplary, you know, real bravery shown in tackling this individual. And when he was arrested, you know, he actually had to detain him. This is a rural force. It's not an inner-city force with the same number of resources.
Meanwhile, roving reporter Charlie Wilson is close by. Suddenly, he's alerted to the breaking news.
A woman sent me a picture of a man on the floor being sat on by a police officer. OK, that's our man. So we know exactly where it is. I'm actually at a shop getting a drink of Lucozade. Run around with my Lucozade in hand. So I arrive at the scene. Ian Hamer is being sat on by a lone police officer, waiting for his fellow officers to come. So to come round the corner and see a police officer sat on who we believe is Ian Hamer was just wild, yeah.
After struggling to contain Hamer for nearly 5 minutes alone, backup finally arrives for the officer.
They must have came, got half a second after I came round the corner, and then police swarmed on him, got him away, and sort of like ushered us away. Clearly intoxicated, drunk or drugs or both, not in his right frame of mind, in the clothes that he was wearing the night before. We get him up, handcuff him, escort him to the back of the van.
Meanwhile, news of an arrest for Joanne's murder filters back to her village of Worleby. Residents can now breathe a sigh of relief.
I was just pleased he'd been caught for the crime, but to then find out that it was her husband, it was a real shock.
Detectives start to piece together what Hamer's been up to in the last 24 hours since fleeing the murder scene.
He went off on what can only be described as a drink and drugs binge. We know that from the inquiries that were made. Laughing and joking, you know, certainly no signs of remorse or distress.
Bar owner Pauline Dickinson had reported serving Ian Hamer. But when he arrived on her premises, she had no idea he was on the run.
He came in the pub around 5:30, never seen him before, asked for a pint of Carling. He got his pint of Carling and went and sat down out the way of everybody.
Next, Hamer returns to the bar and starts to hit the spirits. Soon the conversation heads in a strange and unsettling direction.
Put the tequila on the bar and he literally looked either side of himself, leant over the bar and said to me, "Why did the Mexican push his wife off the cliff?" So I did the same as he did, looked either side and said, "To kill her." He went, "No, you know it." I said, "Yeah, I do." He paid for his drinks, went and sat down. He came back to the bar 10-15 minutes later and stood there.
Then Pauline clocks something sinister.
He hid his arm behind, but I'd already seen that he'd got scratches. I don't know which way, it was just you could see scratches on his wrist. One of our customers noticed scratches as well and went, "Oh, he's one of those who's been harming." One of my customers said to him, "Hey up, mate, what are you doing in here? Are you from here?" He says, "No," he said, "I'm not from here. I'm just going through a breakup with my wife." So he went, oh, right, sorry to hear that, mate. He went, yeah, she's taken me for all me money. So he said, don't be sad. He said, have another drink. So one of the customers bought him a drink.
Over the next few hours, Hamer knocks back the drinks, laughing and joking with the regulars.
So he did about 2 more jokes to the point where the customer said, no wonder your wife left you. If you've got jokes like that, he went, that's maybe why she's gone then.
Quite significantly as well, he was seen to take his wedding ring off. So he knows what's happened. He knows that his wife's dead. So, you know, that's quite a significant gesture. And that was done, you know, merely hours after he'd actually killed his wife. And it just shows the kind of individual that he is.
Some of the pub regulars seem unsettled by this customer they've never seen before, who has struck up conversation with another man at the bar.
My 2 regulars, they finished their drinks. I went, right, you 2 go in. I went, no, we're not going. Says, why? We're not leaving you with them 2. We don't know the other guys, so we're not leaving you with them. I went, oh, don't be daft. What are these 2 going to do to me? I'll soon have them out the door, don't worry. So they went, no, we're staying. So they stayed.
Soon the bar's regulars saw glimpses of another side to their joking acquaintance, who's going by a false name, Sebastian.
So we played pool against one of my regulars, who is a really good player. And during the game, there was banter going on. But right at the end, when the customer knew he was going to win, he picked up the broom that I'd got out ready to clean up and potted Black with the broom. Which Sebastian said, that is so disrespectful to do that. He said, I don't think so, I still won. I don't think he was very pleased and finished his drink, and he did actually walk out. You just get a feeling about people. You know if they're not okay. I don't think he would have done any harm, but who knows?
Next morning, Pauline's alerted to the terrifying news on Facebook that the customer she had served the night before isn't called Sebastian, but Ian Hamer. And he's wanted by police for murder.
My reaction was, oh my God. So I phoned a policeman that I know, and within 5-10 minutes, I think, they'd got him.
Soon the joke Hamer told Pauline about a man pushing his wife off a cliff takes on a sinister new meaning.
It was weird, but they were just jokes, like, you know what, a kid would come home and tell you jokes, but it's not until the following day, and I actually thought to myself, it's as if he was trying to tell us something. I don't know. It's not until the following day that things fell into place.
Despite his intoxicated state, Ian Hamer engages with the police at the point of his arrest.
He says something like, it wasn't murder, it was manslaughter. Something along those lines. I heard the word manslaughter.
He did make a very significant statement, an unsolicited comment to the officer indicating that he wasn't guilty of murder. It was diminished responsibility, so he was already offering up a statutory defence to murder.
After 24 hours on the run, Ian Hamer has been arrested in North Lincolnshire on suspicion of murder. Just hours after killing his wife, Joanne, Hamer was spotted in Pauline's bar, just 7 miles away from the crime scene.
You just would not have thought he'd actually killed his wife and just come blazingly into a bar a few miles away having a drink. When you hear them things, it's like, really? Could you be so cold-blooded and heartless?
When police take him in for questioning, Hamer repeats his claims that he committed manslaughter due to mental illness. But one throwaway comment soon after his arrest suggests this is a cunning ploy to reduce any impending prison sentence.
And what was a telling piece of evidence? He said to the officers who were tending to him, this was manslaughter, and asked this question: have we done enough for diminished responsibility? This was a man who was trying to present a picture of being so mentally unwell that he was not to be held fully responsible for his wife's death.
This is clearly somebody who's a very manipulative, selfish individual, and his response, he's already trying to escape justice for his crime as soon as he's arrested, and he's clearly given a great deal of thought to that before his arrest. And Ian Hamer clearly only cares about one person, and that's Ian Hamer.
In spite of Hamer's claims, he's charged with his wife's murder. Months later, mental health experts are brought in to provide a true picture of Hamer's state of mind.
After his arrest, he was subsequently interviewed by two psychiatrists to explore whether there were any mental illness elements that would lead to diminished responsibility.
They ask him probing questions about his relationship with wife Joanne.
He began to present what was ultimately going to be his defence. He accepted he had killed her, but in the context where he said he didn't want to do it, and used the phrase that it was some sort of psychotic episode.
Then Hamer starts to go on the offensive, claiming he is the real victim in the abusive marriage.
Ian Hamer claimed that his wife had taunted him to say that their children weren't his. He made a slur on his wife's character, saying she was engaged in extramarital affairs. There's no evidence of this.
He would say that she would see other people, that she would be on dating apps and she would find other men more attractive than him. And anyone who knew Joanne knows that that's just completely laughable and a joke. She was the most loyal woman you could meet. Just sort of making up excuses in his head, I guess, to find ways and motives to do what he did.
Then his claims turn even more extreme.
He made plain that he was himself a victim of domestic abuse. You know, he claims that she hit him over the head with a shoe. We've got no information about any injury, or certainly any serious injury to him. He claims she threw a phone at him. Again, there was no injury that we're aware of to support that. This was all seen as a tissue of lies. And clearly the people that knew Joanne had not seen any evidence of this whatsoever. And the only person who could suggest that this had taken place was Ian Hamer himself.
But soon, the psychiatrists start to uncover Hamer's true colours.
What was actually found by two psychiatrists, one diagnosed him with morbid jealousy and one with obsessive jealousy. But clearly, there wasn't an element of diminished responsibility for his actions. From the facts we know about the case and his behaviour and his actions, come as no surprise, because we can see the way that he jealously controlled his wife's movements and behaviour, you know, a real controlling nature.
And when detectives scan Hamer's smartphone, the picture he painted as the victim starts to crumble. Just days before Joanne's murder, they find texts he sent to another woman promising jewellery.
Things he was doing, he would accuse her for. He was seeing other women, that came out. He was on dating apps. He would accuse her of the things that he was doing exactly the same.
We do know that Ian Hamer had affairs, he had one-night stands, and he accused his wife of the same. There's no evidence to suggest that that was the case.
But investigators are blown away when they uncover the name Hamer uses on his dating profile. It sounds strikingly familiar.
He'd use a fake name, Sebastian, apparently. He would use to women wherever he was going to maybe go out on these dates and meet people. And yeah, to use a fake name, like you're obviously up to something that's not good.
15 months after Joanne's murder, husband Ian Hamer is finally put on trial at Hull Crown Court. He pleads guilty to manslaughter on the grounds of diminished responsibility. But the prosecution sets out the case for cold-blooded murder.
So it was a consideration for the jury whether that was a man demonstrating real symptoms of mental illness, or whether it was somebody using any illness to formulate a defense.
The court is told the torrid details of the abuse Hamer inflicted on his wife.
The question that was raised with the jury is whether or not, by the time of the killing, he in effect wanted to get rid of his wife so he could move on, but he needed control of that situation, and that's how we presented the case.
As the trial progresses, even Hamer's own children take to the stand against their own father to describe the abuse suffered in their own home.
One of them spoke of being aware of that from a very young age, and become increasingly toxic and abusive. You then see the horrible human side of this, because they're being required to give evidence against one of their parents, and in circumstances where they've lost the other one. And for them, there's no good outcome to any of this.
Following a heart-wrenching 3-week trial, the jury retires to consider their verdict.
The verdict of the jury was that Ian Hamer was guilty of murder. Therefore, they rejected that idea that his mental state was such that he was not able to exercise proper judgment and control.
He designed everything, including his response to the arresting officer, to make out that this was the case, that it was diminished responsibility. Thankfully, the jury didn't buy that, and they saw through Ian Hamer's excuses for what they were, just excuses.
Hamer's jailed for life with a minimum of 22 years. At the time of sentencing, the judge takes into account the years of domestic violence Joanne suffered at the hands of her husband and his abusive control over her finances.
The judge actually commented that he believed that one of the main motives in this case was he was afraid if the relationship ended that he would lose a significant amount of money. Money to which Joanne, in the law of England and Wales, was entitled to. Those were the family finances that should have been split accordingly. He didn't want that to happen, and he murdered his wife as a result.
Kill someone, go out drinking, using drugs and joking about what he did. He obviously deserves to be locked away for the rest of his life, and I'm glad that's the case.
Killers like Ian Hamer are so manipulative and so self-centred, and ultimately it led to the tragic death of a lovely, caring wife. But there's only one person to blame for that, and it's Ian Hamer.
Years later, the sadness of the case is still felt by those in the quiet Lincolnshire village of Worleby.
There'll always be some weird, I guess, aura for people still living there, knowing that what happened in that house happened, the worst crime you can commit. And I guess it opened a lot of people's eyes to thinking that it's going to happen anywhere.
I feel so sorry for the family. You know, one act like that and it's wrecked the family. And it's something they'll have to live with, I'm afraid to say, and it's not very nice.
Ian Hamer is definitely a master manipulator. A lovely woman who was taken away from us by a horrible, sadistic man. It was something you never expected to report on, especially in Worleby. I never met Joanne, but I know she's a lovely woman. I know that, you know, she deserved a lot better than Ian Hamer. Truly sad story, a sad situation. All you can do is just hope the best for the Hamer family, of the children, just to awful situation which Ian Hamer will spend the rest of his life in jail for.